The new fiscal year is here, and so are the layoffs. If you've been watching this channel for, I don't know, particularly since February, you'll know that I've been saying since, hey, when the fiscal year happens, typically there's layoffs at Microsoft. And this year really isn't any different, with a lot of different teams being impacted, which includes Xbox, who has had a pretty rough year when it comes to headcount. After their Activision acquisition, things kind of exploded in headcount, and now Microsoft has slowly been chopping back, trying to get to something what they probably consider more reasonable, potentially tied to the amount of revenue that the org brings in. And so considering that the fiscal year ended on June 30th, and we are now in the first week of July, the cuts are starting to roll out. So let's just kind of roll back the wheel here for a second. If you go back to January of 2024, so roughly 6 months ago, that's when the first big round of layoffs started to impact Xbox. There were, roughly speaking, 1,900 roles eliminated, and this was primarily targeted at the Activision/Blizzard, if I could enunciate there, being smashed together inside the Xbox org and redundant roles being removed. This included Mike Ybarra, Alan Adam, Project Odyssey, I believe, was canceled, and there was just, generally speaking, this is a post-acquisition slashing of the headcount where there's redundant roles that just don't make sense. Finance and accounting, I should say, are typically targeted pretty heavily. Also, marketing can be impacted, right? You don't need all that overhead, and so that was expected, but still doesn't make it feel like any better, right? That's just how acquisition mergers go. If people say there aren't layoffs, well, they're not really saying the truth, in my honest opinion there. The second round came in May, and this one I think was a little bit more shocking at the end of the day. Unlike the Activision Blizzard stuff that was initially happening, like this one, I think ruffled the feathers of the Xbox community just a little bit more when Arcane Austin was shut down, along with Tango Gameworks. Tango was the one that I think caught many people, myself included, considering how well Hi-Fi Rush had been received. But yeah, so those were earlier in the year, and then things continued to try to just keep going downhill if you're an Xbox employee, or I should say Microsoft employee, because Microsoft started sending out notices earlier this week that says like, hey, roles are being eliminated across the board. It's not specifically targeted at Xbox. I think that is worth denoting here, or pointing out that it's not Xbox only, because there are other cuts across the org. Again, this is, I hate to say house cleaning, because these are people at the end of the day. And like Microsoft is a very profitable company. And so when you see a very profitable company with good margins slashing headcount, like it's one of those things that just doesn't feel right. But at the end of the day, they're company for profit, trying to keep their margins what they are to keep shareholders happy and blah, 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 blah. You can justify it however you want. That is how it happens. And like, so you can see, yeah, people were sharing on social media from different orgs, specifically this one being Xbox, that cuts are happening. And so Microsoft, I believe right now at the end of 2023, so it's obviously less than this, had around 227,000 employees. So it's a huge company, right? There's a lot of people there. And that really shouldn't come as a surprise, right? Microsoft is massive with all their different orgs outside of Xbox at the end of the day. But Xbox is what we are kind of focusing on here. And so once again, the org is being impacted, but it's not being targeted, if that makes sense, right? It's more of like, okay, we got to continue to tighten up the ship, because I don't know what Microsoft is preparing for, if they're thinking the economy is going to slow a little bit and they got to try to keep things in their healthy range for margins. Not quite sure. Or this just could be the annual, we're shuffling the deck chairs and roles are being eliminated as the company moves forward. So we don't know the exact impact of this latest round, by the way. A couple different, including GeekWare, reached out to Microsoft, but they didn't share a number, which makes it feel and seem, actually, I think it's legally, at least on the smaller side of cuts. Like, it's not like they're cutting 30,000 employees from their org chart. So this might be a little bit more of a scalpel rather than like bringing out the broom and like just pushing a whole bunch of things out of the way. I do expect that we'll continue to hear more about changes in the world of Microsoft going forward here. Now that some of these changes are going out, I think there's probably going to be some shuffling up around AI and those initiatives for the new year. Those things will probably kind of trickle out here in the next few weeks. A lot of people are on vacation, and actually some of the people got layoff notices while they were on vacation. That's typically, at least in the US and in the Northern Hemisphere, July is a heavy vacation month, myself included, who takes vacations in July. And so I think as people sort of come back into the office here towards the end of the month, we'll get a better picture of how the changes have started to sort of manifest, and we'll see. And we already know about some in the Xbox, right? They already said some of the marketing shuffling, changing is happening as well. And also we're getting other information too. This comes courtesy of Bloomberg, is that Minecraft is actually looking to figure out new ways for growth. Xbox is going to be under a lot of pressure this year. I would say more so than last year. Last year, the pressure was like, okay, we're going to spend this money on Activision. Like, you got to get it done, right? Because when you're trying to buy Activision, such a huge acquisition, you're sort of in this weird holding pattern where like, hey, we still got to continue to find ways to grow. But at the same time, like, we're waiting for this nearly $70 billion transaction to close, which is really going to shake things up for us. And so now that that is done, they're more in a more traditional cycle, if you will, right? They don't have this Activision Blizzard thing on their back. They're trying to now execute on all these promises that they made to the board and their shareholders and everybody else. And so this is going to come out in various ways. And so Minecraft is actually looking for growth beyond gamers. Minecraft has been the gem, the jewel, if you will, inside of the Xbox acquisition, where it's like, look, we bought this thing for a couple $2 billion. I think it was, wasn't it $2 billion, something like that. And it has just become massive, and they want to try to replicate that success. But that's not easy, finding a diamond in the rough. And I wouldn't even say Minecraft was a diamond in the rough. It was more like a diamond almost on the surface, and Microsoft really just kept fueling its growth and helping its growth. But right, they need growth as well, and so Minecraft is looking for growth outside. We've seen some good examples of media growth, like through Fallout. We've also seen some bad ones where Halo Infinite wasn't super well received. It's media content. And when I say media content, I mean non-traditional gaming content, like movies and TV shows and TV series and that sort of stuff. And so we'll see where Minecraft is going to go, but that's very clearly an initiative that we're likely going to start seeing here in fiscal year 25. So that's 2025 for those who don't quite follow. That's the current fiscal year for them. And so, yeah, the other interesting thing that is going to be happening this year as well as Microsoft's big bet is putting Call of Duty into Game Pass, right? Microsoft has already denoted that, like, hey, Game Pass has to be the thing you judge us on. And this is their biggest bet. I would probably die on that hill, that this is the biggest bet in Game Pass history, right? They've done some other things. I'm not saying Starfield wasn't a big bet. I'm not saying that other titles weren't a big bet. But Call of Duty is closer to like a Minecraft. Now, granted, it's not so much a diamond on the rough. It's already a diamond. And so Microsoft is taking this diamond and just putting it into their Game Pass. And so this will be super interesting to watch, because if this is a success and they see huge Game Pass growth, then it was worth it. If Xbox doesn't see meaningful growth in Game Pass from putting Call of Duty, the latest and greatest Call of Duty title, into Game Pass on day one, that is going to be very scary for Xbox, in my opinion, because, like, hey, they were betting on this being the next big leverage point to really see some substantial growth in Game Pass. I'm a big Call of Duty player. I play a lot of Warzone with friends. And so Warzone is already a free-to-play title. So really the Call of Duty, the multiplayer side and the story side, which I don't know how many people play Call of Duty for the story. I can't comment on that. I don't really play it too much for the story, although I typically, if they do what they've done previously where they release the campaign first, then yeah, I have played the past couple, but I'm not like following this story like it's my life depends on it by any sort of mean. Anyways, the Call of Duty dropping into Game Pass, along with where are all the other titles from Activision Blizzard that could also fall into there, we'll be waiting to see. But that's going to be like the big inflection point. I should say it has to be the big inflection point for Game Pass to trigger growth, because if it doesn't show growth, then what else could, like, legitimately, besides lowering the price and making it $1 a year, which they will never do, legitimately, I don't know what else they could do. Call of Duty is just about the biggest title they could drop into there to try to get things over that hurdle. So it's going to be another interesting year for Xbox. I think I say that probably every year, but once you start to formalize and understand the strategy that is now in play, Microsoft has made a bunch of, Xbox has made a bunch of promises leading up to this, right? Activision was the big selling point, was like, look, we can bring this content and titles over to Game Pass to show growth. So fiscal year 25 should be that year that we start to see those titles dropping, and the growth should manifest for Xbox and be a very profitable year. But if it doesn't, that's going to be, that's going to question whether or not the strategy that Phil Spencer and team has implemented is the correct strategy, because they are going to release hardware this fall, right? They've already announced that the new consoles, I don't think that's going to drive any meaningful growth. I would love to be wrong, but the tiers that they're coming out with, yes, they slightly lower the price for the all digital versions, but what you need, it's like $600. I think it's $600, right? To get the disc version. I don't think there's enough there to drive growth. At best, they will see modest year-over-year hardware sales, but what they're really trying to drive are Game Pass subscription sales. So anyways, keep your eyes and ears peeled. I'm not sure how I'm going to end this video. I had to splice in an outro because I said the wrong thing. But as always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.